Okay. Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to another edition of Reality's Edge, the Doc and Buddy show. We've got a fascinating show lined up for you tonight. We're going to be talking all things UFOs. Buddy's been doing some interesting calculations about the numbers of UFOs. You know, I asked him a couple days ago about this fractal UFO idea. In fact, it came up in an interview that I did on the Inviting the Phenomena show, and I mentioned it, kind of I was thinking about it, and after the show I kept thinking about these fractal UFOs because they found a tiny flying saucer shape in a cold fusion LENR experiment that had been turned off 11 months ago, a still active perfect flying disc mini flying saucer in a LENR experiment.
Wow.
And that's what we've been told, is that the little EVOs keep going even after you turn off the experiment. And this was 11 months and you still had an active little charge cluster in there of electrons doing their naughty business of transmuting and transforming elements from this to that and back again. Who knows what they're going to do? That's another topic for another time. But anyways, Buddy, we've got you here tonight. Welcome. How's it going?
That's going great. I'm in great spirits. And, you know, it's really the orchestra of UFO stuff is really at a crescendo right now. There's so much going on in the news. There's so much more openness. There's an aggressive push by governments to disclose more and more. And you can sense the internal fighting within the governments and within the society in general, and more people talking about it. The discussion is really, you know, we're in disclosure. It's not a day thing. It's a ongoing process, and it's freaking exciting.
Very interesting stuff's happening. And I think the news over the past couple of days, before we get into what you're going to share with us about sort of the structure of UFOs and UFO organization, the mathematical ratios of the size of the craft, how many there are, estimates based on what we've been told from insiders. The news that I'm reading tonight is that the Senate has asked for a permanent UAP task force. Is that right?
Yes. And apparently it hasn't been signed yet. That was the little humbug I heard that. But it seems like it's going to be semi-open, so that this task force is going to have a public-facing wing and, of course, a internal, more classified-facing.
Yeah.
aspect.
Wow. Who would ever thought we'd see that in our lifetime?
Amazing.
I mean,
and
it's about time. It's about time. I mean, look, we're not calling them UFOs anymore, so they're not a threat. They're not unidentified. They're not objects. They're not foreign objects, unidentified foreign objects, whatever. They're UAPs, so it means we can talk about it.
it's more sane.
Your career is safe if you
right.
Yeah, right. Famous last words.
Right. Just try to get a funding for a UFO project.
Right.
But if you want to do advanced propulsion systems, then you might get funding. I also heard that there is a rumor that there's a European country that may do a greater disclosure soon.
Right.
I heard that it might be Germany or Italy, and other countries are stepping up to the plate, it seems like.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I've often said this analogy. You've heard me say it before. I said it the other night with Thomas Fessler and the gang, Linda and Jules. It's like we've been behind a UFO Berlin Wall. And when the wall starts to come down, it doesn't come down slowly. Not anymore, when everyone's got all this infotech in the palm of their hand, be able to communicate and tweet and message and comment, and the news is immediate. When this thing breaks, it just is the rubber band snapping back from this real dark place where it's been, where you can't talk about this or you're going to lose your job. All those pilots, all those people, all the years, thousands, tens of thousands have been quiet,
ridiculed, and
everything. The Nimitz crews, how many have come forward? 20 out of 7,000. We know at least a couple thousand knew what was going on. So Yeah, so when it snaps forward, but that's just my feeling about it, is once it comes
Yeah.
forward, it's going to flip from something to be avoided to all of a sudden it'll be like the hottest media topic ever. They already were into it earlier this summer. June, when the report came out, all of a sudden it was cool to talk about it. I think it's going to keep, waves of this are going to come back where all of a sudden it's like, you see these editorials in the Washington Post and other places, right? And they're saying, all of a sudden it's become okay. It's like part of elite news now. The talk
Suddenly
about
it's
this.
Science.
Yes, it's become
suddenly
acceptable to talk that the fact that the Earth may not be flat and we may not be the only planet in the universe, especially we may not be the center of the universe. It's acceptable. Oh, thank goodness.
Doc,
I feel a healing coming on. I feel it.
And it makes, of course, this is humanity's right to know if we're alone in the universe or not. But what makes it even more ridiculous, the secrecy, is, the Russian government knows about all of this stuff. They have recovered stuff. The Chinese government knows about this stuff. They have recovered stuff. Other countries have all sorts of data and information. The only people being kept in the dark are the citizens. Mm-hmm. And, now the citizens are getting the information. And this is an important step in humanity's, mental adjustment to where we are in the universe. Galileo, helped us to realize that, the universe and the sun doesn't revolve around us. And it's almost preposterous. If you have any inkling of how gigantic the universe is, it's fully preposterous to think that no other life forms exist out there. And just in that step.
You had a tweet about this a couple of days ago, or maybe today, earlier. I just saw it this afternoon and I was reading, I was thinking about it, driving this afternoon. What you said in there was, it's even almost a bigger paradigm change to go from this to realizing that there's extraterrestrials out there and here visiting. It's almost bigger than go from realizing we're just a planet, the center of the universe, all of a sudden we're just another planet. This is like the same thing or bigger. And the reason this has to be true, that there are literally millions of other species out there of humanoids and relatively similar to us in some ways, biologically carbon-based, is that this has been happening for thousands of years. It's been getting bigger and bigger. I mean, our sense of how big it is, you just said it a few seconds ago, the universe is always bigger than you think. And I can't believe that doesn't apply to life forms too. There's just no way it's going to keep getting bigger, but we're the only ones. I just don't believe it.
Especially with the laws of the universe and the basic elements, these are ubiquitous throughout the universe. The laws don't change dramatically in other solar systems. There's not a whole bunch of new elements.
Right,
and
exactly.
These are universal things about our universe. And, we at one point thought that there wasn't a Western, continent.
Right.
We didn't think there were other lands. It took us a while to, as humanity progresses in its consciousness, its universe literally gets larger and larger and larger. And this is just a really crucial step at a crucial time. We're just about to be spacefaring now, and to understand that we're not alone out there and that they're actually here already. That's another big step.
Big step. I don't blame people for being skeptical, and I don't blame people for feeling like they're going out on a limb. I don't blame people for feeling like it's too much to go out on a limb to talk about this, but at some point you have to take responsibility for your reality. What sort of reality do you want to live in? Do you really care what all those people at the party think of you now that you've come out and you've said you're at a party somewhere, a gathering in suburbia somewhere, and you say you think that you might have seen a UFO, you think extraterrestrials exist? I've done this before with all these different topics that we talk about on this channel. And you can get
the UFO guy.
Yeah, there you go. You can get that guy at the party, and all of a sudden you're the center of attention in a way you really didn't want to be. And you didn't come to that social gathering to defend your point of view. At the same time, you don't feel like backing down to some ignorant people who said, if it were true, we'd already know about it. It'd be in the New York Times. Well, it is in the New York Times.
And you know what? This safe little bubble, we create these little safe little bubbles that say, oh, this is how the universe is. I'm safe. I can go outside and buy hair products.
Yes, it's safe to go outside, and your boss won't think any of the worse of you. if you just look the other way and don't get involved. And everyone's been playing it safe. We've been playing it safe for 100 years with this topic. But look, if you play it safe, that's all you're ever going to get. You're not going to get anything really innovative, and you can't expect the economy to really grow very fast if you're playing it safe. Things don't improve by playing it safe.
No. And you know what? We had the comfortability of believing we lived in the comfortable illusion that we were the most powerful things around. And now that there are more advanced intelligences with displaying technologies that are mind-blowing, it makes us think. It makes me think of like when they discovered gorillas. There was a thing of rumors in the rainforest, deep in the rainforest. There's these giant hairy men, and it was myth until I forget who was the first person who discovered them. And then they're stronger than us, but you know what? The universe is a rainforest, and there's going to be stronger ones. There's going to be more beautiful ones. There's going to be, the most incredible variety of stuff. And it's wonderful. It's not scary. It may challenge some religious beliefs, but even the Vatican has said that this is only just a greater indication of God's dynamism.
Right.
So,
it doesn't have to be a threat. It just means we're not the head honchos we thought we were. Big deal. Who cares? That's what it is. It's a blow to the collective ego, and we'll get over it. We want it to be special. We want it to be it goes back to religious theological ideas that we're like the highest of God's creations. And maybe we're one of them, but that doesn't mean we're the only one. Hello.
And it even goes to like that high school mentality of men that are like, I'm the toughest, as long as I'm the strongest, the toughest, then, I can feel comfortable. But as a skinny guy, I never had that, belief system. I didn't mind being the more svelte and savvy, perhaps one. And, humanity needs this. It's something that unifies all of us.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous. And when you really look at the numbers, if you're really deep into the research and the numbers, this is amazing stuff. The implications are staggering.
Yes. Yeah. Now you've looked at it in a way. I haven't watched your video yet. I'm at a remote location where I do my research once or twice a year in the Northwest. And I am limited sort of battery bandwidth, so I haven't had the chance to watch every video that I want to watch. So, but I saw a video you came out with. It had to do with this number crunching about the numbers of you. And I even saw in the thumbnail a pad of paper there. So, buddy, can you take us through what these calculations are and the significance?
Sure. Remember when we were speaking earlier about the fractal UFO theory, about how
right.
larger craft, and that we did some calculations then about sizes of them, and that each craft would have smaller craft inside of them, most likely as protection. We went all the way from motherships to very small craft. And as you get closer to the surface of the Earth, there are more, and they have a greater need for camouflage as you get closer and closer to the surface of the Earth. And I was doing some calculations based on Victor Viggiani's NORAD documents.
Who is Victor Viggiani?
He's a Canadian researcher who did some Freedom of Information Act stuff. And somehow, I don't remember the exact details, he got these NORAD documents that talked about how many tracks come into the atmosphere that NORAD tracks of interest, unknown tracks, interest, and there is a crap load. I mean, it's staggering the number of stuff that comes in our atmosphere. Of course, the vast majority are meteorites and things like that, but it's very difficult to intercept meteorites, with the jets that they scramble. And combined with a lot of different things, I came up with some very, very, very raw estimates. A few months ago, we were also talking about this new trend that's going on in ufology now. There's the more military interactions, consistent. I was talking about this years ago with you about almost every major naval operation has, sightings.
You did say that. Looking like it's true. It's looking.
Yeah. And that there's more fleets, large fleets of craft. We know from the Nimitz incident, they talked several times about, there's over 30 on this day. And, previous day, there was like over 50. And
50.
We're hearing,
Big tax up there?
all sorts of these little things tumbling in from
Yeah.
from orbit to just above sea level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there's so many of these cases with the more and more fleets. And of course, I was speaking about the geometrics, these simple geometric kind of shaped craft. But anyway, so when you do some general calculations, I just did some very rough, raw, wild calculations. And let me just bring them up here. And this is also taking into account some guesstimations about the global sightings as well, because it's not just the United States, obviously. It's not just South America. China and Russia have admitted that they have a tremendous amount of sightings and so forth. So taking all of that stuff into consideration, I did some projections, and I came up with a very startling number of UFOs seen in a year globally. And it could be as high as 7,327. Now, even we could cut that number in half. We can do all sorts of different things, but these sightings are happening every day. We now know that these sightings are happening every day around the world. And even people like Luis Elizondo are admitting it's happening every day. So let's just go with that number, just for, guesstimation sake. 7,327 craft. We don't have to break down the fact that they could, according to the fractal UFO theory, have 2 craft within them, the drones. But if we did, that would be 12,000. 12,654 drones. And if we add that all together, it would be a total of 21,981 craft. That's interesting. But let's go back to the 7,000 craft. And let's guesstimate that they are the length of the Tic Tac, which I believe was 28 feet. I may be wrong. It could be longer. But let's take, if you have 7,000.
40 feet.
Oh, 40 feet. So it's even larger than my calculation.
Larger.
Here. So if you, but under the 28 feet, if you have 7,000 craft at 28 feet, that is 38.86 miles of craft if you put them end to end. 38 miles of craft end to end.
Yeah.
And if you believe, like I do, that these craft, because it's indicated because they crash a lot and because they're shut down apparently, that they're probably not flying across cajillion light years just to crash here. They're probably more likely manufactured locally in our solar system somewhere, or in mountains, inaccessible places.
I've never thought about that before, honestly. So they're not coming from wherever they're coming from. They're made here, made locally in our solar system somewhere.
I think it's far more logical if a advanced species sends out von Neumann probes to monitor different solar systems, and that probe can reproduce a factory, and from there just start, creating whatever it needs. And from there, it can even create the biological creatures, second generation biological creatures to, man these craft, so to speak. And they would slowly expand and have more and more factories. They wouldn't have it all in one location. They wouldn't make themselves that vulnerable. They'd be smarter than that. But you'd have to have a massive amount of factories. You'd have to have massive raw material needs.
Yeah.
And I was doing something just for all the metals and stuff.
Yeah.
I was looking at a map of manganese nodules. If you look here, these locations are very specific locations where there's incredibly high concentration of manganese nodules. Now, the interesting thing about manganese nodules is that they're found in very deep locations that we cannot harvest these, really. There's no economic way to harvest them because they're so deep. And if you look over here in off the coast of California, that is that military naval training zone where the Nimitz encountered
you're pointing to Puerto Rico.
Oh, I'm sorry, the other side. Oh, excuse me. Right here. And that's where the Nimitz craft is. Many of the Catalina sightings are. And that location is actually called the Clarion-Clipperton Manganese Zone.
Right.
That one right there. There's also another incredible one right by Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
In that incredibly deep Puerto Rican trench. Yeah. Also, there's another one called the Peru Basin, just outside of Peru. These are all locations that are UFO hotspots, big time.
Now that is interesting because at a UFO conference I was at, one that's going on right now, I believe, as we're recording this, the International UFO Congress. There was a researcher from Latin America, and he had spoken to the Chilean military, and they thought that what these UFOs were doing were mining, because they would see them over ore-rich areas, and they would see stuff falling from them, dripping, and they were over the ocean, and they came to that conclusion. And I thought, mining? Why would they need to mine here? Well, maybe they need, now you're suggesting a reason.
Well, you know what? I would think that they wouldn't take stuff that humanity needs necessarily. I think they would feel more acceptable to access metals and stuff where we can't reach them, deep underground, deep under the ocean. We know that they, those of us who've done a lot of research, like our listeners, that they like to hide in mountains and the deepest parts of the ocean.
Yes.
And of course they can get a lot of this stuff in space and in other zones, but the concentrations that natural life systems can create some of these minerals and metals even in is much more favorable here on Earth than out in space. If you need iron, there's plenty of iron meteorites out there, but then when you get more complicated, manganese and stuff like that, and stuff that we know is in some of this metamaterial. So this is it's really fascinating. And then you have to ask yourself, one of the basic things an advanced intelligence would do is counter surveillance of our technology levels. So they could always be just outside of our technology levels. If we had a location if they had a factory, let's say on the far side of the moon, like Ingo Swann and others saw many years ago, if we suddenly got the ability to travel to the far side of the moon and do more surveillance, they would move them. And I think their UFO history shows that they changed their craft over time to represent near future technology. They don't create anything that's more than they need.
What you're saying, like this is UFO theater?
Not even. I think it's logical. If you're a super advanced race, you don't need to use your biggest, baddest, highest end technology. You could just do a much lower technology that accomplishes the goal that you need. And why spend the extra energy or resources to do the much grander or larger one? So I think the realistic aspect of an advanced civilization here is they would be more advanced than us to a point where they would feel secure in their ability to do stuff. But it may not represent their true technological level. They might be much, much more advanced. And sometimes with some UFO sightings, we see some of that really weird stuff that seems to be a lot more advanced than a lot of the regular solid craft. When one craft breaks into three craft, and then poof, disappears. There's hints of much higher technology.
Hints of much higher technology, yeah.
So there's just lots of details here. We could look for factories and think where would be the best locations.
I do have some corroborating evidence for you from a former president of the U.S. Stop me if I mentioned this before, but this is something I heard from someone I've known for a long time. They were at a location where a former president likes to hang out once in a while. And the Secret Service hang out there and so forth. And the owner of this establishment just brought up the subject of UFOs, like has happened to other presidents recently, like Obama on one of those late night shows. Just brought it up. And apparently this president, I guess I'm not allowed to say who the president is, but this president said very factually that they knew about an extraterrestrial base 600 miles off the coast of California. And when I'm looking at your map there, that 600 miles looks an awfully lot like the Clarion-Clipperton manganese zone. I mean, when I'm looking at it, that looks like about 600 miles.
Does.
It's pretty darn close. And I was looking at it, I'm thinking that's what somebody told me that this president said not to, earlier this year. I'm not kidding.
Yeah. Well, I'm not surprised. I mean, it's surprising information, but I'm not surprised. And we know there's more bases, and we know that they're going to be in the most inaccessible places.
Inaccessible.
And I've almost come to, I've come to several notions on how we could make contact. Right now, they're not feeling the need necessarily to contact us. They have a tremendous amount of craft. Now, we don't know if they recycle these craft after using them, or if they're being used constantly for some other agenda. But when you think of the fact that they could have 7,000 craft just from 1 year, this is a very big force they have. Or they're recycling constantly, just mission dependent. And I don't think they create a whole bunch of extras for no reason. I would think they'd be more efficient than that. So I think we could calculate what are the most inaccessible places on Earth, where, cross-reference that with sightings and some other factors, and we could have some very, high probability base locations, and they wouldn't be just one. They wouldn't just have one factory.
No. So going back to that interview I did with Kevin Day quite a while back, 2019, not that long ago, but UFO MegaCon, and he said that what you're saying is that were tracking maybe 100 of these vehicles up. I forget the number he used, but he said, they were up there for a while before, and then they started dropping down, not making any sonic booms, even at 20,000 miles an hour, as they came right above the water. And then Fravor sees this seamount with one of these Tic Tacs, and no one's ever talked about what that seamount could be. I mean, you don't just have seamounts out in the middle of nowhere. There's got to be something.
Well, there was a very interesting fact. I don't know if you remember that the Tic Tac, he said there was a white area that was in a circle that was frothing.
Right. And that's saying, what are the possibilities of the frothing? Is it a group of dolphins? Can dolphins make that? Or
no?
They like to circle around tuna and stuff like that and create cavitation bubbles to confuse. And then could it be whales?
Or could it be a larger craft that the smaller craft is transferring something physical?
Yeah, I mean, it's curious to me, but we've never really had a discussion of what that was causing the disturbance of the water. It's on record from, naval pilots associated with the Nimitz. I think Alex Ann Dietrich said she saw it too. Didn't she say she saw it? So we've got a couple pilots that saw this disturbance and this Tic Tac hovering over it. I mean, that has to be something. So what could it be? People that want to debunk the Tic Tacs have never attempted to explain what that seamount was. And that has to be some sort of very fast fish swimming in a circle, creating subsonic booms in the water, or it's got to be a physical object. And if it's not our physical object, then whose object is it?
Well, you would think, let's just take the hypothesis that they're building craft and that they're studying us and getting samples and things like that. Yeah. You would have smaller craft that are scout craft that would go on different missions and get samples of materials or biological samples. And then they would transfer those to a larger craft that holds them until the amount got large enough to go off planet. And these larger craft, I've heard stuff about, especially with the Nimitz incident, that was a saucer. And that they even got amazing footage of a saucer leaving.
Oh, they did. There's more to it we haven't heard.
And I've got videos from a while back that talk about it, and all this exact.
There were other witnesses who saw saucers. You're right. Do you think that was the saucer?
That was the large saucer, and it certainly couldn't be a pod or a whale doing the bubbles or any of that stuff, because the Tic Tac is very large as it is, and it was doing this. That weird zigzagging motion, that random walk. And remember how Fravor said it also had these extensions out the bottom of the Tic Tac?
Yeah, those extensions. I've always wondered what those were.
It's possible that they are for a physical transference of something. There's data you can send electronically, but if you had a physical specimen and you were storing up stuff, you'd have to have some means of doing a physical transfer. And perhaps those little tubes were for transfer, or they could have been for a variety of different reasons, but that seems logical if it was transferring to a larger saucer to store up till they got to a large enough amount. And if they are, this is just wild speculation, of course, if they are building craft locally, they'd have to get the raw elements, they'd have to refine them to the point that they would be usable to them. And they'd probably have a storage of that too. There'd be a lot of shuffling and shuttling of different stuff, aside from perhaps another larger agenda, like I believe, is that they are studying the biosystems and getting all the data and information from all the life forms here as well, because knowledge is power, you know, and knowledge is the most
Well, buddy, I have
precious.
to ask now. I have to ask you this question.
Yeah.
Is this just speculation on your point, and I'm nothing wrong with that, or are you going off something that somebody told you, Comrade Badinsky? Do you have some inside information about this that prompted you to go in this direction, or is this just you thinking based on the data and the evidence, or do you have some inside track here?
It's a lot of different things, actually. It's
Okay.
First of all, it's reductionist logic.
All right.
A lot of this stuff is. I've had the occasion to work with different very well-known people and groups and shared some of these thoughts as to what an advanced civilization would find the most important, the most valuable. It's not monatomic gold or diamonds. It's information. Knowledge is power. And life forms are one of the densest forms of data, knowledge, information in the universe. Very dense. And by studying our biosystems, they could learn a tremendous amount. If they were making second generation life forms, the more they know about biology and the incredible diversity that God and the universe can create, then they have a lot of power. You know, we have heard cases of alien beings swimming in the deepest lakes in Russia.
Yeah,
And
the Paul Stonehill Lake, was it
Baikal?
Baikal, yeah. Those huge swimmers.
Yes, we've heard of all sorts of different types of beings that looked engineered, from the Mothman to speculations about Bigfoot to other types of ETs that were different sizes and heights.
Different sizes and heights.
And there's a belief that some of them are, you know, they're created to man these craft. They're more efficient than robots and blah, blah, blah. You know, it's the most advanced robot is a biological creature.
What do we make of the fact that we're told that these crash materials appear to have been manufactured in a zero-G environment? Now, I don't think it's something we can do yet very much. You could do little tiny things on the International Space Station. I'm sure on some of these private launches from Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos, you could do it for a couple hours or however long they, you know, are up there before they re-enter. But we're told sustained production in a zero-G environment. That means outside the Earth's gravitational field, or at least
not necessarily. Now, we know that their spacecraft themselves change the space-time metric. So it's possible.
Yeah.
There's other possibilities, but you know, you can tell how intelligent a species is by how small they can do constructions. And right now, with a scanning electron microscope, we can move one atom at a time. And you can imagine a much more advanced race able to place, you know, thousands and thousands of single atoms at a time where they want it. This material seems to be engineered in that kind of a way. So it could be, you know, in space somewhere in zero gravity at a space station that we can't see yet, just a little further than, you know, our, you know, telescopes can capture, you know, maybe on the backside of something that we can't see, Ganymede maybe, or under the surface of something, or, you know, there's a lot of possibilities.
Now, there was a book you reminded me of a book I came across a long time ago. Norm Bergstrom, I think it was, this former NASA space worker. He wrote the book called The Ringmakers of Saturn.
Oh, okay. Yeah, sure. I've heard about that.
Yes. Now, in this book was fascinating. He had given lectures at the UFO Congress. I did get the book, and what he argued in there, buddy, was that the rings around Saturn are artificial. And he showed this by showing places where the rings come to an end, and where the end is a long craft kilometers across moving through, and behind that craft you see the rings, and in front of it's nothing, as if it's going through space debris and like breaking it up or something like that. And that, I think it was Norm Berggren. I think that was the Norm argument ring makers of Saturn is that these extraterrestrial beings are mining different systems in our solar system.
It's possible. I don't know for certain, although I do have very strong beliefs about certain places in our solar system that are likely habited based on a bunch of different information. But I think rings are a natural planetary process post a major impact. And that even small asteroids will have rings on them. It's in zero gravity, in space, an impact has a tendency to create rings. Now, those rings, if there's a large piece of mass that happens to be in that ring system, it might have a tendency to pull some of that ring matter closer or further, or it might have been interrupted by the entrance of these larger pieces of rock or whatever. So I don't know, but I have heard about that theory, and I like it. And I also like Ganymede.
It's true. They can be obviously formed from impacts, and it's a natural spatial pattern around a gravitational mass is to form a ring like that. I think his point is that if you had artificial mining activity going on, it would look exactly the same. You wouldn't be able to.
Yeah.
It would just distribute, and gravity would take over. But that's what you're making me think of. This is an interesting thing, going all the way back to the Chilean officials, military saying, I believe it was Chile, saying we think they're here mining based on where we see them. They're over areas of ore deposits. And then you've had these incidents where you find stuff dripping off of these craft.
And the mining thing, Linda Moulton Howe talked a lot about, like Skinwalker Ranch, I believe, has a molybdenum mine very nearby. And a lot of places
it does.
Yeah.
Is
a
that
lot of
right?
A lot of places where there's been a repeat UFO history has this strange possibility. I think Hestelin as well is another one of them. That there's a lot of unique stuff in the ground. So it's interesting. I wish I was more educated as to, in space, where do are there higher concentrations of manganese, or some of the stuff that we've seen in the metamaterial that they've admitted to, like bismuth? Is bismuth found a lot in asteroids?
Well,
I'd be very curious.
No, because this is interesting. I mean, we normally don't go in this direction on the show. We like to go in, very kind of
more solid. I mean, this is very speculative.
This is more speculative, but this is interesting because I have been reading about some of these meteorites that have come close to Earth. And some of them have what would be worth like $1 trillion of titanium on the meteorites.
Wow. As
they come by. And I bet a lot of individuals and companies are looking at this saying, there goes $1 trillion. If we because they've done, NASA it just retrieved some material from I think, what was it? Was it a meteorite or something like this? They had a robotic craft go there, and as it's going.
Yeah.
So obviously there's a lot of interest, but here's the thing. If we're interested in it, what's to say that someone else hasn't already figured out a way to do this?
Yeah. And
instead of having these rare earth metal shortages like we have on Earth that limits our energy production and storage, like lithium, and just Afghanistan, we're told that there's trillions of dollars under the soil of Afghanistan, but how are you going to operate over there in that environment of perpetual conflict? So, so it's an interesting question, and actually, I have to admit, it's something I haven't thought about very much.
And too, I always presumed previously that any elements that they wanted, they would get in space and wouldn't need them from Earth. But then I was edified by a scientist or two that said that life has a tendency to concentrate some elements at levels that you just can't find out in space. And it would be very difficult to get tons and tons of certain elements and certain types of rare metals and things like that.
Well, here's the thing, buddy. That's a very interesting point. Just because what I've been studying recently, Cold Fusion Leonard, Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project, their argument is that Leonard creates all these elements that we find on Earth. In other words, EVOs, when you put them onto a planet, will start their business of transmuting elements and making the planet habitable. In other words, if you didn't have a lot of, oxygen and titanium and tungsten and all these elements, nitrogen there at the beginning, nitrogen especially, you will, once you have Leonard, and if Leonard's a natural process in the universe, mini ball light, if it's just natural for the universe to create this, it terraforms planets.
Wow.
But it takes a while to do it. So this would explain that any planet could become like Earth in the long run if you had the right sort
exotic vacuum objects. Yeah.
Yes, working, and you could start with any element you want. This is the big revelation
Alchemy.
from the Bob Grenier and the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project. I've been watching, and this is what it is essentially, you could start with the rockiest, desolate planet, bud. No water, no oxygen. You put EVOs into whatever is the dominant element on the planet, and it's going to start transmuting and creating the whole.
Sounds like strangelets.
The what?
It actually, EVOs, for those who don't know, it's called exotic vacuum objects, and they're subatomic particles that is not confirmed for certain and accepted by the general scientific community, but it's becoming more and more accepted, and it's being utilized.
I think we can confirm they exist. It's a question of how. The real question is, how widespread are they in our environment? Are they limited? This is where the debate is. But you're right. Go ahead. Continue.
And that exotic vacuum objects can create a whole bunch of different phenomena. But they also behave like strangelets, which is a subatomic particle, I believe, that if it touches others, it can turn them into strangelets and other particles. And, the vacuum itself, weird particles leap out of the vacuum, come together, and then self-annihilate. All sorts of weird stuff comes out of the vacuum, and a lot of people attribute that stuff to EVOs. And these EVOs is a super fascinating topic. Super fascinating.
No, they really are, and it's going to become a much bigger thing because of the ability to transmute radioactive elements into harmless carbon.
Wow!
They do this by
the Philosopher's Stone.
It really is. Alchemy turns out to be real. The textbooks were wrong. I can say that categorically now. I have been looking at these Leonard experiments. Anyone can watch Bob Grenier talk about this, but I'm not going to go too much into this now. But I mean, he's shown you create the tree of life of elements. Any Leonard experiment, cold fusion, it all produces the same thing in the long run, which is you could start with a couple elements or one, and it literally creates electron degeneracy where you have this primal matter, and then from this primal form where all the electrons are at the same frequency, they break down into our reality again. They redistribute into all the elements we see as they come out of the Leonard process, and it sort of rains silica and oxygen and nitrogen and magnesium and all these other elements, just starting from helium and hydrogen. You end up with all these other elements, and then you get heavier and heavier metals and so forth. And so the reason I'm bringing this in is not just to talk about it now, but it would seem that your argument that you made a few minutes ago might hold water, which is rather than the elements being out in space and on meteors and things like this, and, planetary objects, it's actually where you find life that would indicate where the Leonard Evo process has been operating the longest, transmuting the elements into the elements of life. In other words, buddy, if you're looking for the widest diversity of atomic elements to make your craft and whatever else you're making, you would find them where you've had the EVOs operating the longest, not out in space on some forbidding meteor surface where there's no
life
atmosphere.
Would be an indication of that, then, is what you're saying. Exactly. Life would be an indication of that.
Exactly. Isn't that something? Life would be an
I don't know much about EVOs, but you've educated me so much about them. And as time passes, we really are on reality's edge. We're really all this phenomena, as I say again and again, phenomena is always almost always the hint of a new emerging science. And there's so many different phenomena around us now, from different types of energies and all these wide variety of consciousness phenomena. This is a really transformative time for humanity. We'd like to think almost we were in a comfortable zone where science was just moving at a very comfortable, slow pace, and I think we're about to hit an incredible warp speed with all these different new sciences emerging.
It looks that way.
This is, Doc, a lot of people don't like to speculate, and go down some of these, pathways of, thought experiments. But I think they're very valuable. And I think by looking at just some of the discussion we've had today, if these numbers work out, even if they're a tenth of the numbers of these craft, that's a big material, elemental resource. Where do those come from? Where are they manufactured? Where are they purified?
Yes.
Where all these different questions. Are they recycled?
Very big questions, buddy. And okay, now you got me thinking. Okay, so we've had a lot of resistance to this idea of UFOs and UAPs and ETs. But the way you're presenting it in terms of manufacturing and materials and exotic elements, it doesn't take very much to get economically oriented organizations interested in, whoa, now they're going to say, here's what they're going to say, buddy. Now you've got my attention. Because
money? I can make money.
I can make money for you. There you go. See, now because I didn't think about it. I never really thought about where these things were. Okay, so until tonight, I've always assumed these things were just showing up from wherever they were made. And we talked about the fractal ratios of bigger. Yeah. You had that pattern. You haven't held it up tonight. I remember, the mothership and then the smaller ship and then the Tic Tacs and even the miniature ones. And now we've seen a mini flying saucer and a Leonard experiment. I'm kind of kidding. I was going to post it on Twitter, but I didn't want people to take it literally. It looks like a literally glowing Evo in an experiment that was turned. It looks exactly like a little flying saucer embedded in copper or whatever this material is. Perfectly round.
If we have nanocraft, don't assume they don't. Don't assume they don't.
So that is the thing, buddy. If you present it this way, you could get a lot of people interested really quick, because now you're talking something that's investable, something that it gives sort of the earth a kind of a
philosopher's stone. It's a philosopher's stone, Doc. It's amazing. Now
we have to go back to Ingo. All good things go back to Ingo in this conversation,
don't they?
In Penetration, he wrote about being taken up to a lake in Alaska by the twins and Mr. Axelrod. And they said, just wait, something's going to happen. And there was a triangular craft that he was told came over this lake at the same time every month or something like this. And it would suck up water out of the lake. And Ingo made a joke while they were at a safe distance, but the thing came over and started releasing, electrical shocks into the trees. They had to run because it was coming in their direction with these electrical things. But basically Ingo made a joke to the group he was with. He goes, what is this, shopping cart earth? Just need some water, you show up.
Right.
But maybe they're from here. They're not literally coming from far away to get the water.
If I was a super advanced race,
there you go.
I would send probes, von Neumann probes, out to solar systems that had great chance for life. And that probe would have fabricators inside of it and could create more of itself, the very definition of a von Neumann probe.
Right.
And it could create an entire factory, and the factories could create more factories and could create biological factories, and that it could, all the UFOs we've ever seen throughout history could originate from one von Neumann probe that landed 10 million years ago.
Yeah, because there's a chip shortage right now that you've heard about, right? This shortage of integrated circuit chips.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's holding up. This is why cars have gotten expensive, used cars and all sorts of technologies. Apparently, Apple couldn't even put a certain type of processor in the iPhone 12 because of this chip shortage that's going to come out in the they're having their iPhone 13 released next week.
Is that because of rare earth elements?
It had to do with the manufacturing shortage related to COVID and so forth. It's not literally a shortage of rare earth, it's a shortage of manufacturing facilities. And this apparently is affecting solar economy right now, solar companies and all sorts of companies. Automakers use tons of little chips in everything now, probably even raising the window up and down has a little chip in there. So there's been a shortage of a lot of things. And so this is sort of, it's pertinent to what you're saying is something that a lot of people are thinking about is manufacturing. How do we do this when there are interruptions? And it's so, a complex process to make a chip. It has to take months and it has to be done just right. And they're grown, these crystals are grown, and all sorts of things have to happen. If you have a shortage of people anywhere in the system, last year is because of COVID, people staying home, you just don't have your factory up to par. And anyway, it's a fascinating subject, but it's something we've never talked about here before. And I never thought about it. You really changed my mind tonight. I mean, you got me thinking about, is it sort of something that's here, that's making it here instead of just coming in from outside? I mean, of course, I have always proposed the multidimensional, interdimensional idea. Here we're talking about physical craft. We'd all agree are physical, tic-tac, stuff like that. Picked up on radar, picked up on satellite sensor systems. I mean,
and if you wanted to just watch a solar system, time is a special game of an advanced civilization that we don't quite appreciate as much, because they can put something out there. There's been many speculations by, scientists and astronomers and so forth that an advanced race kind of grows and explores more and more solar systems like we're exploring. And they could leave a super intelligent, beacon, monolith, von Neumann probe, and be able to garner all that information and data and watch things over time. They could have watched, the von Neumann probe could have watched the civilization that might have been on Venus or the one that might have been on Mars. But the amount of craft that we have seen in UFO history and the diversity of them says something very, very interesting.
Diversity.
That they're not, I think it's less likely that there's all these different races, coming here and then crashing across billions of light years, rather than that they could have been manufactured locally for specific purposes and thereby had more vulnerabilities. And because that they were supposed to be manufactured at a certain, defensive advancement above ours.
There you go. But now, okay, so just as we wrap this up, I guess we're coming to our hour here. But
what a fun talk, though, Doc. I mean,
well, see, this could justify what a lot of military secrecy is about with regards to this issue, manufacturing of metamaterials. I'm seeing a classified stamp come down on this broadcast. No, I mean, think about what we're having fun talking about this, but this is obviously a very serious subject, and obviously any government and military around the world would be highly concerned that their adversaries may get access to this before they do, which would give them a huge advantage. After all, how many military encounters in the past have come down to hardware and manufacturing ability? Everyone.
I can admit this, and I don't think I will get in too much trouble. I've had a discussion with, and please don't guess at the name, someone who is in the aviary. Someone who's very advanced and very knowledgeable about this stuff in a senior governmental position, and agreed with the notion that you would not send the primary species life form across the universe to go sit and watch solar systems, that an artificial intelligence might have sent these things here, and that all of the different craft and all the different biological creatures that have manned, quote unquote, manned these craft could all be created by some sort of artificial intelligence. Because you wouldn't want to risk necessarily sending yourself across the universe to sit around for a long period of time. But you could share in that if you had appropriate technology where you could experience through the different technology. I've always thought and assumed that UFOs and even the biological occupants could act as avatars for the primary civilization.
Yeah, it might be safer that way. After all, we're pretty unpredictable. I mean, if you show up here, we don't even know what we're going to do. How would they know what we're going to do? We don't even know. Okay, so everyone in the box below in the comments, take your guess who Buddy's talking about. No, I'm just kidding.
No.
Choice A, is it John Alexander? Choice B, Richard Doty. Choice C, Eric Davis. No, I'm kidding. Just, we're not.
But I have, and this conversation is, you know, I even think Luis Elizondo hinted at, we think we know what these things are and who they're from.
Yeah, that's what he did. He said that.
And he's not talking about time travelers, us from the future, even though that's a fun theory.
Now we're really getting to something about manufacturing and technology. This, I can tell you, they're very
38 miles.
38 miles of craft. Okay, everyone who watches, you're all sworn to secrecy.
That's right.
This meeting never happened.
I'm gonna bite my button.
We're gonna we want
Cyanide pill.
Give us the radar tapes. All right,
Doc, I think reductionist logic can take us into some wonderful exploration.
It can be very helpful. I mean, we need all our skills. We need RV. Sometimes we need intuition, and we need good old logic can steer you off. And there's nothing wrong with it. We don't, you know, it doesn't work in the RV realm, but in other realms, mathematics can be very helpful and useful to extrapolate from what the limited amount each of us has seen. I've seen a few craft, you've seen a few craft in your life.
Yeah.
But you extrapolate that, you know, it's kind of like you're giving us a sense of how many are out there. Okay, so final question of the night before we call it quits. Are we going to see more of these craft showing up, smaller and smaller ones? I'm joking about the flying saucer in the Leonard experiment, but it looks like that. Do you think, Buddy, or anyone, put your comments in the box below. I'm interested. You know, we're always interested in what you have to say, but are we going to see more of these smaller ones? Because, you know, I did go out to that part of eastern Colorado where they said there were drones showing up, and now we're told that they're drones that were like faster than helicopters in that chase over Tucson. Pretty fast drones, because I lived in Tucson and those choppers were really quick. So are we going to see more of these, and are they going to be confused with drones? Yes, I can tell from your okay, that's everything.
Doc, I mean, I think there's no reason to presume, when we were talking about the fractal thing, there's more as we get closer and closer to the surface with a greater and greater need for invisibility. So you don't, you know, a lot of people think you got to look up to find UFOs. You might be looking the wrong direction.
Yeah.
You know, the soldier I just interviewed talked about one of the stories that he didn't tell on camera. One he did was about the craft that was on the ground that they didn't see. They had to really go through extreme means to see it.
Okay, no, before we go, we have to just summarize this again. So fascinating interview Buddy did with this veteran of Afghanistan, and he said they had these, correct me if I'm wrong, these little sensors that were kind of linked like seeds, but they were kind of linked the way we'd have our Bluetooth devices linked in our home, smart home. And they could tell you weights of things, and they could tell that there was a craft that weighed exactly 12,000 something pounds, and that there were exactly 3 beings walking around it. Buddy, from the sensor data, Now that is mind blowing that they have that level. So you couldn't see it with your eyes, and they could barely. It was kind of like Predator, like from that movie, like a little wispy. Once they looked through the night vision or something, they could. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, and with the beam craft that I saw, you could see the edges more because it just might be something about the structure, you know, and how the technology works. But the closer you would get to Earth, there'd be more, and they'd have a greater need for invisibility.
And that's what he said. It was on the ground, and it was blended with whatever was behind it, rocks.
Yes, and he had another story about a being doing the same exact thing. a being, and the being had the same ability to do that camouflage. I also had some videos about these smaller beach ball sized UFOs that were whizzing through between people at such a high speed they didn't even see them on the beach. And from two different incidents, the same exact things. And I talked about a while ago, circles with squares within the circles, which actually I think jet fighters saw off the East Coast. And even in that drawing I had of the different craft, it's all the way down the bottom. You could see it, this circles within the squares, the geometrics. You know, I think we may be surprised, you know, nano craft could explain how they're able to get into nuclear silos and stuff and shut off the equipment. I wouldn't think they don't have nanocraft.
Nanocraft. Wow.
Doc,
Well, everyone, I would say keep your eye. What's that? Keep your eyes
It gets
peeled.
uglier and uglier the more you think about it.
Well, this is, see, now you're okay. We're gonna wrap it up right here, but this would be a reason why the government doesn't want to talk about it, because they can't come out and say to everyone, okay, by the way, everyone, just so you know, there's invisible little craft around everywhere, and there's absolutely nothing we can do about it. We can't even see them most of the time. Okay, go back to your business, go back to your job or whatever you're doing.
You know,
they're not going to say that, but that could cause people to panic.
You know, we could figure out things logically. We were talking before about resources, the most difficult to access places on the planet, and UFO sightings. You could cross-reference those and target certain areas of most probability of bases. There's all sorts of cool stuff we could do if we really wanted to.
Well, I see a lot of avenues for research. Buddy, this has been fascinating. As usual,
I loved it.
You've gotten me thinking in ways that I wasn't thinking before.
Hopefully it wasn't too weird.
No, this is a very kind of a down-to-earth talk. That this is the first time we've had a discussion like this. I mean, manufacturing and technology, and it's a different way to look at it. Is they're here because this is where the resources are. It's more efficient than bringing the materials from Alpha Centauri. Is just to use your Leonard-based EVOs to transform any elements. You could get any element out of the ground and transform it into some. You got to start with something, but you could transform into anything you wanted once you got anything out of the ground and water. That's all you really need to go to town, and you can just make what you need in your underground bases off of Puerto Rico and California and Peru. And
just, you know, 10 years of craft would be 70,000 craft. Where are they?
Where are they?
We will leave all the same craft. There's so many different types, Doc.
We will leave you folks with that question for next time. Where are they? We have a sense of how many miles they would be, how many, and it's a good question. So anyway, buddy, this has been fascinating.
Thank you, Doc. Thank you, everyone, so much. We love
everyone.
You
we always enjoy doing. Leave your comments in the box. I'm sure whatever you agree, disagree, just put your comments in the box below. Buddy, thanks again, and we will see you on Reality's Edge.